All right, there we go. I'm guessing everyone took one. I made enough copies so that you can actually take two, and you don't need to get the second one right now. But I'm giving you two because one copy of the speech planner you are going to give to me no matter what. Next Monday, all of you are going to give me a speech planner. Whether you're speaking on Monday or not, I get a speech planner from you on Monday. I'm also going to get a works cited page from you for your speech on Monday. You made enough copies for you to have two because some of you might decide that you want to have a second one as like an outline that you would use when you come up and give your speech. Some folks like to type a speech planner, and I know some of you were using Google Docs for the pop culture spar rather than handwriting stuff. If you want to give me a typed version or you want to give yourself a typed version, that's perfectly fine. But you're going to give me at least something that's going to look like a speech planner. That's kind of essentially a rough draft and outline of what your speech would be. If you want to use one for your speech, or you'd rather use note cards, or you just want to go off the top of your head, whatever the case, is perfectly fine. But there's enough copies there for two, should you choose to do that. I would not take a picture of it with your cell phone and then bring up your phone to use as your speech planner, because that's going to be kind of awkward while you're, pinching and all that kind of stuff with screen size and getting all that stuff figured out. So speech planner, obviously you're going to have name up at the top here. Resolution. This is going to be the same resolution for you and your partner. So what constitutional rights for Jenna and Ben, they would have the same resolution written up here. This would just be coming from your resolution sheet. So there's not going to be any difference as to whether you're affirmative or negative. The claim down here, now this will state whether you are in affirmation, whether you are going affirmative, or if you are going to be going negative with it. So here is where there would be a little bit of change for it. You wouldn't simply want to write affirmative, negative, but you would write your claim, yes, students learn their constitutional rights, no, they don't, whatever the case may be. Grant, what are you and Katie doing?
It is more important to become empathetic citizens and self-sustaining individuals.
Okay, so one of you would go, it is more important to be empathetic, and another one would go, no, being self-sustaining is more important than caring about other people's feelings. I feel like Grant's going to go empathetic.
That's really what you
Yeah. No, not for you. Nope, not going to happen. No offense, but not going to happen. Within then your planner, here where it talks about introduction and all that kind of stuff, there is no need for sentences. So I have no need for full sentences. This is essentially going to be bullet points throughout as to points that you would want to identify. Notice that I highlighted that you have for your introduction, you're going to be speaking for 1 minute. And then when it comes to the body of your argument, that's where you'll have 3 minutes worth going on. So you would just kind of highlight little stuff that you want to be able to touch on in your introduction, and then you would do the same thing for main idea 1, main idea 2. Main idea 3, which I think for you is on the back of your page, is optional one in the sense that everyone's going to have at least 2 main subtopics. Main idea number 3 is probably going to tie into whether or not you have time permitting. So if you are spending about a minute on each of your subtopics, your main ideas, you would certainly be able to do a third one. If you find out that you're doing like a minute 20, a minute 30 seconds on each of your main ideas, that's going to eat up your 3 minutes worth of time, and you would only do 2. I don't care how many you have. It's not that if Emmy has 3 and Emma has 2, that one's going to be losing points. As long as you are fulfilling the time requirement and you're still on speech, it's fine. It's not that, well, you lose points for not having as much, or Emmy loses points because she wasn't going into the amount of detail. Both of them would be perfectly fine. Have the potential to be perfectly fine.
How will we know what our time is?
Like while you're giving your speech, you mean? You will obviously have clock there. I'll be sitting in the back, and so while you are speaking, I'll hold up. You got 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left.
Okay.
Like we do with the SPAR debates, if you want to have your cell phone up here, you certainly can do that, as well. It would probably be a good idea to plan for 3, and then adapt.
Right.
So if you think you're going to cover all 3, and you go, oh my goodness, took me, a minute and 40 seconds to do my first main idea. I think I'm going to skip the second one and get to the third one because that's one I definitely want to cover. That would be fine. I'm not going to call you out. Grant, you said you were going to do 3 on your speech plan. You only did 2. What in the world happened? You know, you adapted. You could also go into it, you know, going, I'm pretty sure I'm only going to do numbers 1 and 2, but it might be a good idea to have number 3 kind of there as a backup where you discover, I talk a million miles a minute. I got through that in 45 seconds when I thought it was going to take me a minute and a half. So I think most of you will probably do 3, but regardless, I would definitely plan on it. But you don't have to worry about, you know, you end up having to kind of adapt. Number 2 is not going to work. I'm just going to do number 3. When you get to your rebuttal and counter argument and closing, one of the things you could do is also finish off something you didn't get to. So within those 2 minutes, you might have the ability to at least kind of touch on something if you want. And just like we did with the SPAR debates, I'll give you like a 10-second grace period. So at 3 minutes, I'll hold up the stop sign, but you can keep going for those 10 seconds. And then at that point, we'll get the shepherd hook and pull you off stage. Exit stage left. Or right. I don't know.
Stage left is okay.
When it comes to your counter argument rebuttal, this one you're kind of going to have to play it by ear. Where this argument is going to be what I would call somewhat fluid, that it's not going to be set in stone, because you're going to be responding to the opponent. So as much as you want to ask Jenna, what's your main argument going to be so that I can plan my rebuttal, that's not information that she's going to tell you ahead of time.
Whether she might.
Say nothing to Cade, because he's going to be asking him all homework.
Kate is the worst case of he will accidentally tell something he's not supposed to. So,
Cade will go like this.
That's good.
So have your rebuttal. I would plan your rebuttal roughly being probably about 60 seconds, 1 minute to maybe 1:15. And then that would give you appropriate enough time to finish off your conclusion, where this would probably be in that 45-second to 1 minute kind of range, where you're going to basically recap all of your main points. The main thing also to consider, and we'll talk about this with your rubric, during your speech, you need to have at least 3 examples of eloquence that you're going to use. And those would be 3 separate, 3 unique examples. So you can't use alliteration 3 different times and go, that's my 3 examples. Of those 3 examples, at least 1 will be a scheme, 1 will be a trope. So whether you go 2 scheme and 1 trope, or 1 scheme and 2 trope, it makes no difference. But you do want to identify what is your type of eloquence that you're going to use, and then give us your example in your speech. This would be a reason why I would probably want to take my speech planner up with me, or at least something similar to it, so I don't forget to do that analogy, make the illusion, or something along those lines that you said you were going to do. You don't have to quote it word for word. On your speech planner, you might do something, my example in the speech is I have an analogy that I'm going to make in my main argument number 2, if you want, and I would be okay with that. Or you may want to quote it word for word, but make sure you identify the term, so give us the exact term, and then let me know what that overall example is going to be. Speech planner is meant to help organize, plan. I'm not trying to make it like a busy work assignment for you, but at least you have an idea then of what you're going to do when you come up. Your speech planner plus your works cited page that you're going to give to me on Monday would be 25 points. So in addition to your speech grade, which we'll talk about from the rubric, you'd also be getting 25 points for turning in the plan and having the works cited page. Extras, I'll always have on the side for it, for the rest of the week. Some of you are already grabbing some more, others might kind of decide a little bit later on. All right. Any questions there? All right. For your rubric that you have, I just want to touch on a few points. You see down here at the bottom, told you on Friday, 100 points. Really, you could kind of think of it being roughly 125 points when you throw in the speech planner and the works cited page. So, significant amount of points coming in with this. Plus, you throw in the fact that you have a 50-point article analysis next Friday. Your points are essentially doubling in the next week and a half or so. I'm sorry?
What kind of intensity are you looking for?
You have to shout.
Intensity? I want you to go like Jack Nicholson, A Few Good Men, You Can't Handle the Truth kind of thing.
I'm gonna like Jack
Have you seen the movie, Nick? Yeah, yeah. That's what we're looking for. Since we're down here at the bottom and Aiden's already asking about it, honestly, with these things, it should be a 15 out of 15, 14 out of 15. The one that folks used to struggle with the most, I would say, was eye contact with the audience. With the audience. So, well, I mean, one person's going to be over here, one's over here. When you are getting into your intensity moment, you might look at Nick as you were just kind of doing right there, you know, staring him down. But for the most part, it would be making eye contact with the audience. Since I've adapted to using a speech planner, I think people have done better with eye contact because they're not reading outlines word for word or, you know, essays and all that kind of stuff. So that's naturally gotten better. Intensity gestures. Now, I don't need you making like, you know, hand movements all over the kind of thing. But vocal presentation is primarily volume and the enunciation. You know, the intensity is where, all right, we're not going to have the same monotone voice the whole entire time. Whether or not, I don't know if Ben is like emotionally invested in the constitutional rights of students.
I'm gonna build my character.
But for a 6-minute period, I would like him to be. You know? So along those lines is where that intensity needs to be.
We're already there.
You are not on stage. You are performing, but we don't want you to go out of character for who Aiden Kelly is.
What's my character just shouting all the time?
You're not arguing with Sam. You're arguing with Jenna. You're debating.
I think Jack Drive.
But and in all honesty, because some of you were asking on Friday, you know, how many points do I get for winning the debate? You don't get any points for winning the debate because we don't really necessarily do a vote. The whole purpose of the argument is so that the audience becomes better informed and can make his or her own decision. So yes, we want the intensity to kind of come across where you certainly care about your position, your topic, but you're not trying to beat the other person into a little pulp of, you know, mush at the end of the period. You want the other person to argue back. You want the other person to question your ideas because that gives you another opportunity to defend them all. Right now, Carrick's intensity would be at like a -12.
He's on.
He's nodding.
Yeah. That's his listening technique.
Carrick, who's your English teacher this semester? Mr. Heil? Carrick, for attention grabbers, does Mr. Heil have any rules, like at the beginning of essays?
Yeah.
What does he not want?
Oh, I can't remember what it is because we don't have one essay so far.
Psalm quotes.
I don't know about Mr. Heil. I know for sure Mr. Franks does not want a rhetorical question. I bet Mr. Heil does not either. So, for your intro, within your 1 minute, give us some kind of attention-grabbing device, something to grab our attention, but I would definitely avoid rhetorical.
Listen up. Everyone listen.
Avoid rhetorical questions. Things that you certainly could decide to do would be anecdotes. An anecdote doesn't have to be a personal one. Hey, Nick. You could go with anecdotes. You could certainly go with some kind of statistic.
A dictionary definition.
No.
Oxford Dictionary.
So, folks. So give us something that is going to kind of draw us in a little bit into what your argument could be. And even, you know, you could kind of use an anecdote with humor, depending upon what the issue is that you're going to be using, and depending upon how well you're going to be at conveying humor. Because sometimes that works well for others, and other times it does not work at all. You saying she's not funny?
No, I thought you were alluding to her.
Do we allude to that like every single
I was not.
every day?
So, something that's at least going to kind of pull us in. Then, make sure you certainly state your claim, state your position, state your plan. Make sure you identify what your subtopics are going to be. So, there shouldn't be any kind of surprise as to what your main points would be. There could be a situation where, we were kind of talking about how many subtopics would you be planning on touching on. Then maybe you explain that you're going to do 3, you only have time for 2. I think you'll have a good idea as to how many you would hit, but I would certainly at least try to introduce these ideas to us so that we know where you are going to be at. When it comes to the body of your speech, then, when you have your 3 minutes, for use of logos here, you need to have at least 2. So whether it be statistics, testimony, research studies, or stories examples, there might be also, I should have kind of included an other category. If you have something that still works for your logic that does not fall into those categories, I'm okay with that. But you would have at least 2 differing ones. You're not going to have all statistics, all statistics, all statistics going throughout. One thing that is definitely different from what we did with our SPAR debates is you do have to reference at least 2 cited sources in your speech. That does not mean you have to quote them, but you would have some kind of transition along the lines of according to, in a recent study, or article, where you mention the source, the author, the research institution that you're referencing, but give us at least 2 things. If you start off with a famous quote, song lyric, Ben Franklin aphorism, or something along those lines, that's not going to count as one of your 2 reference sources. They would need to be within the body. So your works cited page, you would have to have at least 2 sources. You certainly could have more. If you end up having 5 sources on your works cited page, that doesn't mean you have to cite all 5. You still would only have to reference at least 2.
Testimony is like a personal example.
Not necessarily like your own personal example, but it's something that, so someone's experience, that would be their testimony.
So couldn't they kind of overlap with what you're saying in a recent study? Would that also be a use of logos?
Would also be,
A use of logos. As a research study.
sure, yeah. So so where sometimes people will go, research studies have proven that 54% of Americans feel that they are in financial control of their lives. So you could be throwing out statistics or research studies, but not necessarily citing them. I agree that those things would probably go together. At the very least, whatever you feel to be your best examples, I would probably want to cite those, because in a rebuttal, Ben's going to be looking for some kind of, maybe her sources aren't really all that good. You never even told us where they're coming from. So yeah, just because there's a research study doesn't necessarily mean that has to be one of your cited, but I would agree that's probably a good thing to do. So 2 is the requirement, the minimum. You can get a 10 out of 10 with 2. Should you want to cite more than the 2, I'm perfectly fine with that as well. Any questions there? And by citing doesn't mean you're going to go parentheses, Washington Post, Dr. Parkill's recent article in, the February 17th Post-Gazette article, details, that would be perfectly fine. Doctor.
It's funny because my dad's a chiropractor.
Did anyone
He said this I thought of my dad. No,
Oh my
no.
God, Grant, that's hilarious.
There's
Yeah,
also
it's
a
actually
t-shirt
true.
I
Grant,
can
that's
use,
so funny. It's like short
It's like, man, I was thinking of that too.
Nice
Thank you,
logo.
guys.
Closing, you got your 2 minutes. Rebuttal, that you do some kind of counter argument. This isn't necessary, but one of the things to always kind of keep an eye out for would be logical fallacies used by the opponent. Keep in mind, just because they use a credible source doesn't mean that you're going to go, that's appeal to authority, you use the source. It's appeal to authority when you're using the source in lieu of any kind of logic. You're just citing Dr. Parkhill because, he's a chiropractor, so he knows stuff, therefore it's relevant. So just because a source gets used, remember, doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be an appeal to logic or something along those lines. So you got 2 minutes for your closing. If you need to wrap up an argument, you certainly would have that ability to, but 15 points for the rebuttal, and then you restate your claim as opposed to going, and that's a wrap. Mention these speaking techniques. Have your use of eloquence, all 3, so that would be 5 points per, and then that would add to your 100. The places where people most often lose points would probably be, not probably, definitely, the use of eloquence. They skip over it. They think they're going to say something and they don't. Also, definitely the citing of sources, where they won't go the whole according to aspect. Those would be the 2 main culprits. The other thing I would say would be sometimes, not majority, but people won't get into like what the plan, what the subtopics are that they're investigating. So if you hit your subtopics, if you hit the cited sources, and you make sure you use your eloquence, you're probably going to put yourself in a pretty good position. On Wednesday, I won't be here in the morning. I'll be in the building, but I won't be in here. I'm going to be in the library with Patty and a couple other first semester argumentation folk. So I don't know who the sub's going to be. You're going to be just researching with laptops. But because I'm not here on Wednesday, tomorrow I want to determine speech dates. So what we would do is tomorrow you would get back up with your partner. We're going to pull numbers. If you pull number 1, that doesn't mean you're going to be speaking first, but that means you would get first pick for when you would be speaking. The first speech would be next Monday, so the 11th. We will do 1 speech on Monday the 11th because it takes a little longer on Monday with collecting materials and all that stuff. And then that means on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we would be doing 2 speeches. We have 8 speeches that we would be doing total, so our last one would then be on Friday the 15th. So please take a look to see, do you have any orthodontist appointments? Do you have any, come in late, early dismissal, or some kind of thing that would go on that would prevent you from speaking the day? Tomorrow, we'll pick those topics. I don't want to wait till Thursday, because if you're going on Monday or Tuesday, I want you to know about it as soon as possible. All right, so that won't take us long. Pretty much then, after we do that beginning of class, remainder of the week, laptops will be here. It's preparation for you. Keep in mind, you don't have to use all online sources. If there's any print sources you have, interviews, things like that, you can certainly use them. Maybe you can take a field trip and go look at the Constitution, like the original one.
According to the picture that I took.
We don't want to get those confused. Articles of the Federation versus Constitution. Make sure you pull through. I bet I get the water bottle. I can split 8 get them. There we go. Okay, hold on. I have to do something first, and then I'll sign it.
How's it over?
That's fine.
All my glasses free, actually.
So that would be an example of, make sure you pick Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
According to my ugly.
Please. Zach, with that saying 14 through 16, so that includes Saturday, so it's only Thursday and Friday.
I'm gonna make this essay literally only watch professors. See what happens.